final month of the regular season is here, and we're back to our normal day here on Wednesday with another episode of This Week in CA Football, presented by Geico. Bobby Broyles and Tim McDonald in studio as always. Another solid Saturday of games around the league in Week 9, and it's incredibly hard to believe it, but the stretch run is here, Tim.
Sorry, you know me in playoffs, Bob. We're starting to get
I know
the
you're ready.
about it. We got to start in Williamsburg from Saturday. William & Mary, and JMU. What a game. Just like another classic CA football game. That's back-to-back Saturdays where James Madison's been featured in a game that, unfortunately, have come out on the wrong side of, Bob, but just been a fantastic game.
Yep.
Saw the new-look James Madison offense move the ball well. William & Mary, give them credit. Give the Tribe credit. Double A. I'm going to call them Double A from now on. Anderson and Abdul Sabor just absolutely carried that team, literally. Both scored 3 rushing touchdowns, combined for over 200 yards rushing. Of course, we see that final drive from William & Mary. You kind of got the sense that they were just going to move the ball down the field and score. 12 plays, 84 yards, 41 seconds left. Anderson, of course, you knew he was going to run that one in. William & Mary picks up a huge win, and James Madison all of a sudden has lost 2 straight. Then you look around the league, 19-0 win for Towson over Delaware.
Yeah.
Just absolutely dominant on the defensive end, only allowed 102 yards of offense. Yes, 102 yards of offense allowed. You look at New Hampshire, down 17-0 at the half.
Yeah.
Goes into halftime and says, we got to change something, and they do. Come back and hang on to win 20-17, setting up a huge matchup this week. Richmond, again, same thing, a little bit. Go up in that one, huge, up 28 points in the third quarter over Albany.
Yeah.
A pick six, a kickoff return for a touchdown, a fumble, and Albany comes back, but Richmond does hang on and gets the win. Then kudos to Elon. We're seeing the youth of Elon really pick up and get a nice win on the road at Stony Brook. A huge victory, the first ever CA football road win for Elon, so kudos to the Phoenix.
3 televised games highlight Saturday in CA football, and all of them have possible playoff implications, Tim.
Yep.
You got to start with the bright lights and a nationally televised contest on NBC Sports Network as New Hampshire and Richmond at 3 o'clock in Durham. UNH has that playoff streak still in mind, and Richmond is still in the driver's seat atop the league race.
It's interesting. When I think of this game, I look at this series, and you look at the series recently, Bob. UNH has owned the series.
Yeah.
They've won the last 4 meetings. I had to look this one up. It took me a while. I'm not gonna lie. UR hasn't won at New Hampshire since 2000. That's a long time. Of course, these teams don't play every year, Southern and Northern teams. But again, Richmond reminds me a lot of New Hampshire from last year. Lost their opening season of the game to an FBS opponent. Since then, offensively, it's been the run game and it's been the pass game, and a lot like UNH last year. Richmond's entering this game, obviously averaging a ton of points, 37.9 per game, 195 rush. They've scored 23 rushing touchdowns on the ground. The offensive line, I think, from Richmond, we talked about it versus JMU. We talked about how we've seen them in person. That's maybe been the story offensively in CA football this season.
Yes.
Seth Fisher still isn't playing, and even if he does play this week, we know Jacoby Green, a guy who's steadily grown over his career. Right now, he's just been an absolute monster. 6.3 yards per carry, 779 yards, 12 touchdowns. His numbers have just been incredible for Richmond's offense. Again, Richmond's defense, I know we overlook them sometimes, but I don't think that's the story because UNH, we saw how they played versus Rhode Island last week. I think that's going to be huge. Which UNH team? Is it going to be the second half team versus Rhode last week, which came out and got things done?
Yep.
Sean Goldrich was a little bit more mobile in the second half versus Rhode Island last week. You see guys like Dalton Crossan, Jordan Powell, and a guy to look at, I think, for UNH this week, Keon Taylor is a wide receiver who got off of suspension. He's back in the lineup again. Again, New Hampshire at home, Bob. We know how well they play. 45-5 at home since 2007, 10 straight CA football wins. It's the story of the day is going to be, can New Hampshire stop Richmond's running attack? I think Kyle Auletta is, of course, going to find his favorite targets in Brown and Diggs, and we talk about them every single week, but it's true. Brown's a guy right now who's averaging over 20 yards per catch. I don't know what you do if you're New Hampshire defensively, but you have to figure out something. It's going to be a great game in a national audience. New Hampshire plays well at home, but Richmond right now is on a roll.
UNH and Richmond can also be seen on NBC Sports Live Extra for NBCSN subscribers. Earlier in the day at noon on Comcast, Sportsnet, and CA.TV, William & Mary heads to Elon. You know it's coming, Tim. Is this a trap game for the Tribe?
I knew that was coming from Bobby Broyles. The classic trap game from
classic
Beebs.
trap game.
But, I looked to a quote from Jimmy Laycock this week, referencing Beamer at Virginia Tech retiring. He said, "You have to keep things in perspective and don't get too high or too low. So for me, I look at that quote and I think of William & Mary's season so far. 6-2 right now, 4 straight wins. It's been a combination of a good run game. We've talked about Double A, Anderson and Abdul Sabor. Anderson right now has 6 straight 100-yard rushing games. The Tribe in general have had 13 straight games with a running back over 100 yards rushing. again, it's just you see it looks and feels like a different William & Mary team from years past, in my perspective. They're going on. You're going on the road to Elon, a team that just beat Stony Brook. This, for me, it's not a trap game just because, like I said, I think this is a new William & Mary team. Special teams has been great. Defense has been great. I mean, I don't care what the stats say. I really do believe William & Mary's special teams units, whether it's punt block, field goal kicking, field goal blocking, is the best unit in the FCS. They proved it last week versus James Madison. Plater, the defensive end for William & Mary, had 2 blocked field goals. Again, a lot of experience for Elon and for the young guys on Elon last week at Stony Brook getting that win. And then we see the 2 scores that made the difference for Elon in the second half in that win at Stony Brook were made by true freshmen. Of course, a lot of confidence coming back home, but again, I think William & Mary's running game and William & Mary's defense right now, too much to lose for the Tribe, even if they have to go on the road.
Then the TV nightcap comes at 7 on the American Sports Network as well as CA.TV. Towson, winners of 3 straight, faces Maine up in Orono. Points might be at a premium in this one, Tim.
It's true. Towson's defense, like we've said, has been just lights out. Last week allowed 6 first downs, 14 pass yards. Just, unreal numbers. Yeah. And again, not to say that I called it last week, but I have been saying to you, especially Bob, Towson's defense in the last 3 games, is averaging a little less than 249 yards per game. They've just been absolutely stout. And again, we saw Darius Victor, scored a touchdown last week, didn't have the biggest numbers. Markel Dickerson, the backup running back, had 102 yards rushing. Connor Frazier threw for a lot of yards. I know he threw for 2 picks, but he did throw a career-high 284 yards passing. Towson right now, look at this team, where they're at currently. Yep. We saw them a couple weeks ago, 2-3, 0-2 in CA football after that loss to JMU, and right now they've won 3 straight games. Coming into this one, Bob, I'm just really interested to see if they can show up again. Maine's entering this game off a tough loss at Villanova in a game that, no disrespect to both teams, but it just was not a very sexy game.
No.
Couldn't sustain drives. Maine struggled. 1 of 4 in the red zone, 4 of 12 on third down. We know who Maine is going to go with under center. It's probably going to be Drew Belcher again, and I think Maine offensively just has to be able to sustain drives. Defensively, Maine can stay in this game in the first half. I just don't know if they can sustain it throughout the whole game. Towson right now, with a win, is back in the playoff competition.
At noon on Saturday, Albany hits the road again for a matchup at Delaware. This has been a common theme at times for these 2 squads, but each could really use a win right now.
Easier said than done, right?
Yeah.
Delaware's run defense, as much as the offense struggled last week, I think Delaware's defense still impressed in some ways. Only allowed 126 rush yards. Still number 1 in CA in rushing defense, 106 yards per game. Albany now enters this one with 3 straight losses. A little bit of credit has to be given to Albany looking back at their game last week. Like I said, down 28 points at Richmond. Could have easily folded the chair and said, let's just go home. But battled back and continued to fight. We did see a quarterback change in Nevin Sussman, 170 yards, but he did throw 4 picks, all to David Jones, unfortunately. What a game for David Jones of Richmond. But still, Albany, we know they're going to try to change things up offensively. Abitian Hanks, I'm sorry, how do you pronounce his name?
Abitian Hanks.
Thank you, Bobby.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
A career-high 202 rush yards for Albany, so that has to be a little bit of a positive. But again, I'm going into this one. Delaware's 0-4 on the road, 3-1 at home. I think that's the key. Delaware is such a different team playing at home.
Yes,
Look at their 2 CA wins at home. William & Mary and New Hampshire. You have to give the credit to Delaware. It only can get better after struggling so much to get anything going offensively last week.
At 12:30, Villanova heads to Rhode. On paper, this series has been dominated by Nova, and the Wildcats sit at that critical 4-loss mark right now, so a little bit of desperation on that.
It is a little bit. It's like their backs are against the wall, but they've known that too. Bednarczyk and Underwood got it done last week. Bednarczyk, of course, the quarterback, and Underwood, of course, the running back. Both got it done, combined for 39 carries, 215 yards. Bednarczyk did a little bit of a John Robertson impersonation where he had 123 rushing yards and a touchdown, 143 passing yards and a touchdown. The change for me in Nova, still alive technically if we want to call them playoff alive, still alive in that, has been on third down. In the last 3 games, Villanova's averaged right around 59.5% on third down. That's been a huge change. And Rhode Island, you want to see how they respond. I know they're coming back home, but up 17-0 at half. Jim Fleming says, no, we're not going to kick a field goal. We're going to go for the score right before halftime. And they get it done, and they're up 17-0. And in the second half, Rhode only has 29 total yards. It's just a very tough loss. And Rhode's interesting because you look at this case. Last week they started a kid in Wesley McCoy, who was a true freshman, only played in 2 games, but that was his first true start last week at New Hampshire. Coming back home, I think Rhode has a little bit of confidence. We know they're going to try to get the job done to Harold Cooper. But still, I think Villanova right now, like you said, with that 4 loss and their backs against the wall, I think they're going to be able to control the tempo of that game and get a win to stay alive a little bit.
Concluding Week 10 with the league's final non-conference matchup in the regular season when Stony Brook hosts Howard out of the MEAC at 1 o'clock.
An interesting time to have the final non-conference game
Yes.
of the regular season. Howard's a team right now that only has 1 win on the season, came last week versus Savannah State. They've already played 2 FBS opponents this season earlier. So Stony Brook, you'd like to think, has a nice chance to finally pick up a win back at home. Again, no discredit to Stony Brook, but a very tough loss versus Elon last week. It's not like they gave up a ton of yards and a ton of short play. It was big plays, though. That was concerning, something that we haven't seen from Stony Brook. Through 3 quarters last week versus Elon, allowed negative rush yards, and then in the 4th quarter, Elon managed to get in the positive and finish with 71 yards. So you'd like to think Stony Brook maybe has a better chance to finish this week. Joe Carbone earned his first start of his career. He played the whole game last week, but he did throw 4 picks. Stony Brook right now needs to find answers. I think it's going to come versus Howard on the run game.
Ever wonder where to find links to watch the live streams and live stats for all of our games? Head to cafootball.com. We've got you covered there. Don't forget to CA.TV has simulcasts of CSN's coverage from William & Mary at Elon and ASN's coverage of Towson at Maine.
The best way, if you ask me, Bob, to follow CA Football Saturdays, if you watch the games, of course, is on social media. We have Twitter, we have Snapchat, we've got Facebook and Instagram too, so you can be sure to follow us by searching CAA Football and interact with us as well by using our official hashtag CAAFB each and every week.
I know we might be traveling to championships, but Saturday will definitely be in
tuning in from all across.
Absolutely. That's it from us today. You know the deal. Same time, same place, right here next week.